Hello, and welcome to AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything live stream, episode number 36. Got the numbers synced up again. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. How about you, Stephen?
Good. A little tired, but very good. Good start to the week.
How was the weekend?
Really good. I think it was, well, okay, one of my sisters had a baby shower, so that was really exciting.
Oh,
And then
fantastic.
we just we spent the time just relaxing, getting prepared for the week, and we had a few family activities. And so, as fun as they are, you know how by the end of it you have to have a little bit of downtime.
Yeah, absolutely know that feeling. But that's
How are you?
awesome. At this end, I learned a new skill. I learned
Oh, yeah?
spot welding. I designed and built a brand new battery pack, a custom battery pack for myself, a power bank.
cool.
It's a super fast charging battery bank for my travels,
Okay.
where I invariably find myself running out of charge on my phones or on my iPad very, very quickly, and not finding the right adapter as I travel, all over the place. So I'll share a link soon to this YouTube channel where I think it's called the channel is called Great Scott, and some really amazing tips. So custom built a 3D case for it, got some interesting power electronics, and just custom built an entire battery pack. But the funnest part was spot welding. New skill, had to learn a bunch of
Welcome to the
practice a lot.
I'm putting a link to the channel now. So how does that work? Are you basically like melting two bits of the plastic together to fuse it together?
No, so with spot welding, the thing with batteries, especially these 18650 lithium-ion batteries, is that you don't want to heat them up, so you can't solder them. So the
Makes
only
sense.
way around it is to actually use spot welding, where there is just this momentary arc that melts just one tiny little bit of nickel onto the. So you basically have a nickel strip that you weld onto the battery with a tiny little arc.
Oh, I see. So you're actually welding on because it's a permanently installed connection. So rather than
Yes,
the spring and clip, you're welding it on to the battery, and then you can have
correct.
the batteries are effectively permanent. Although you could, I guess, desolder it when the batteries
Exactly.
reach their end of life.
So it was a fun project over the weekend. Something new, something different, and I got to 3D print a bunch of stuff as well. So that was pretty neat.
It's funny, like both from a knowing how it works perspective, and then also being able to like you said 3D print, and it's amazing the markup on those things. And you actually think about like when you buy one on Amazon, those things are like $40 or $50, right? And I'm guessing that
Yeah.
the little controller was around, I don't know, $5 or $6.
Yeah, it was about $8 for the controller. I think my 3D printed cases were maybe a couple of dollars. And then the batteries, I already had them lying around, so I just reused the stuff that I had lying around. So that is pretty cool.
That is really neat to be able to repurpose and also just to see how it works and to know what's going on inside. And you could build a bigger
Exactly.
one if you wanted more capacity. That's really neat.
Absolutely. So anyway, good fun project over the weekend.
Oh, speaking of weekends, I have to show my two little ones set up, did part of the scene for me. I'm going to turn on the troll cam here. There we go. They were doing the some thrift shopping, and they found this little decoration. They came back and they said, "Dad, we found something for the background of your live stream." And so you can see the perspective behind me.
Right
I've got
there.
the plant, and then so I've set up that little camera, and it's fun to change the set and change the decorations. I'm not very good at watering my my flowers. I need to get better at that. But there they are. There's the little trolls that they set up yesterday. They even pointed the light right at it. So that's neat.
Pretty neat.
I like that.
That's really cute.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, should we? We've got some interesting general tech kind of breaking news that I wanted to share. Should we jump into that?
Let's jump right in.
All right, here goes. All right, so this is something of general interest. Microsoft just announced yesterday, so actually right after this show, they're going to be doing a press release at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that's in about 55 minutes. Something special regarding AI, regarding Bing, presumably regarding the OpenAI. Here we go. I mean, the massive $10 billion partnership with OpenAI, makers of ChatGPT. I've been using ChatGPT a lot. That's been a lot of fun. Raul, what do you think is going to be in this announcement? What are your predictions?
I think the biggest rumor going around is that Bing is now integrated with ChatGPT, and there'll be some very interesting natural language querying capabilities in there. Though I did hear that Microsoft is looking to integrate ChatGPT into pretty much all of their products, including Office 365. So it'll be interesting to see what vision they have for those products.
Yeah, I mean, I can see ChatGPT's integration with Office to be able to say, okay, write an outline of the following topic, and then you go in and fill it out, and then say rephrase this sentence in another way. I use it a lot to bounce ideas off of. That's going to be exciting if they get that, and what that means is they've got a plan in place to line up all of the computational power to do all this inference.
Because I've already been seeing a bunch of demos where with Excel, you just fill out a bunch of random data, say addresses that are in all kinds of different formats, and then you use the GPT-3 plugin that is available now for Excel, where you can identify the zip codes in there. You can identify the city that people are in, the states that people are in, based on very differently structured or unstructured examples of addresses. So I think when it comes to operations, like, I actually see a tremendous scope for data cleansing when it comes to using something like GPT-3 or ChatGPT for just cleaning up your data for machine learning activities.
Yeah, and having some smarts behind that is a really good idea. Actually, I was looking at our Amazon RSS project that we'll share an update on next week. But I typed into ChatGPT, what are all of the RSS feeds that Amazon has? And it gave me all of them. I said, okay, write a Python function to iterate over these and download everything using the FeedBurner API. It did that. And I'm just stitching these functions together, doing a few modifications here or there. And actually, similar to what you'd mentioned here, there's a really neat blog post I saw yesterday called Man and Machine, GPT for Second Brains, where someone wrote their own code for their own personal note-taking systems, but using GPT for a semantic search. I thought that was neat. Well,
I think there are going to be a lot of very interesting use cases coming up over the next few months. Can't wait to see what people create. The one thing that, one application that seems very interesting is you can actually use GPT to differentiate between mastery and rote learning. Like, if you can create an adaptive learning system that's constantly creating differentiated questions and is able to then judge whether you have mastery over a subject or not, versus rote learning that happens a lot in education across the world. That seems like a breakthrough in being able to really judge whether students understand and know their subjects well enough or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. You can tell what's reflected back and then what's truly new, right? You can differentiate. Yeah. Actually, and then Stugorf YT said, I wonder if they would take search results and then summarize them using ChatGPT. That's an interesting point, right? Because there's one thing to say, here's 10 different articles, but then have that higher level synthesis. What's the big picture?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at ChatGPT today, it is operating like a search engine with all the summarization capabilities, just that the data that it has in that particular model is 2 years old, right? But if that could be kept alive, if that could be kept relevant, then it would just operate like any other search engine, and you would get all the relevant information. And you could probably build out. I mean, I think the big difference I see coming is not just one-off searches, but conversational searches. That means the context of what you've asked before gets used in your next question.
And I like how with ChatGPT you have different conversations. So you can say you have different contexts depending on the
exactly
context.
And I think that's the game changer in search, because it's typically when you're searching for stuff, it's a whole thread, and that thread might have different branches that you go out and seek, and the conversational user experience is best suited to serve that use case.
Well, even I saw a thread yesterday on Hacker News where someone used the phrase SME, and it wasn't clear from the context whether that meant subject matter expert or small and medium enterprise. And they both kind of worked, but within a conversation, you know exactly what, because you define it the first time, and then It's clear.
Exactly. So, I mean, lots to come. I can't wait to see the announcement that's coming up shortly. And hopefully next week we'll bring you the highlights and updates from that.
Well, and then in a parallel announcement, we've got it seems like a very rushed, not rushed, but they're wanting to keep pace and stay in the conversation. Google has announced Bard, which is based on their Lambda model, or language model. And they have just said that Bard has now been released to preview.
The partner network.
Who are testing it.
Correct. So they announced Lambda during the last Google Next event, and it definitely was very fascinating. But they've had this model running for more than a couple of years now. I think 2 years ago they demonstrated the ability for the Google's assistant to basically make calls into retail stores, or make appointments for you basically at restaurants and salons and barber shops or whatever, on your behalf, especially when they don't have an online appointment system. And it was pretty remarkable to see that entire dialogue and conversation happen. I think they've just sat on it for a while, trying to figure out what the right way to get it to market is. And now that they've seen, ChatGPT work, this seems like a great time to bring that to market.
Yeah, well, it's pretty exciting to see a healthy competition in this space. I think it's going to drive innovation forward. We're going to see some really neat new ideas of how to use these things. I think we know in a sense we know, quote, how they work, but in another sense we're still scratching the surface of how to interact with them, how to integrate them into our process, into our thinking. So
Correct.
Exciting to see what's coming up.
But the most pertinent question for me is, what is AWS doing?
Yes. So hopefully we'll see. Well, they're not building out all this inferentium architecture for nothing. So, but we'll
Correct.
see.
So hopefully they have a model in the works or close to release that anyone who's already in the AWS ecosystem is capable of using right away. So
And
can't
can
wait
be
to see what they come up with.
be integrated easily with the existing Amazon tool sets and be regulated via IAM. And it'll be interesting to see how the pricing works and how you provision it, if you can provision your own infrastructure, if it's totally serverless. So
Yeah.
all exciting conversations to have once hopefully we know more.
Okay. That is a fun, differentiated segment that we introduced. Shall we get back to the regular weekly AWS announcements?
Absolutely. Let's jump into the first one, which is the integration of automation with Change Manager. So here comes.
Great.
Okay, this is AWS Systems Manager announces integration of automation with Change Calendar. So what is the big picture here?
Okay, so this one is interesting in the sense that whenever you want, so for those who don't know what Change Manager is or system, the Change Manager is basically a service within System Manager that allows you to make changes to your AWS account. It's the ideal way to do it. Change Calendar is actually interesting in that you can block out certain periods of time where certain automations can be executed that'll modify your account or change stuff, or think of it as a more regularized way of doing your maintenance windows, where this is centrally governed. Can be centrally managed. It can be centrally audited to do all of this, and that's pretty neat. The fact that you can do this. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'd imagine, to use a pertinent example that's right around the corner, if you were an advertising company, say, okay, we are not changing anything before Super Bowl Sunday, right? No changes go into effect Super Bowl Sunday. We've got everything tested. So don't change anything, right? And because many of these changes are done by decentralized teams, right? And so with Change Calendar, you can have a global freeze on changes for a period of time.
Correct. I think this goes hand in hand with another systems manager announcement that just came in a few hours ago, which was around. I think the announcement was that you can now have multiple you can have multiple levels of approval for change manager requests within Systems Manager. And I think when you combine these two announcements that came in, short order of each other. I think the takeaway is that these are a bunch of features that large enterprises have asked for, where any change requires multiple levels of authorization. Yeah, this is the one. It does add complexity. Like, I mean, in the world where you want changes to be simple, seamless, to be able to get it out there in production, this seems to add a bunch of additional steps. If it comes to it, it just complicates FinOps a lot more from an operational standpoint. So absolutely, I think the complexity alert definitely falls in for this particular announcement. But I think the other announcement about scheduling a change management window, because change management windows are a thing. Everybody uses them, especially for anything that is going to be disruptive. So to have these calendars in place as part of the system, this definitely simplifies things. And yeah, I think this is a good thing to bring in a single calendar that keeps everyone on the same page.
And I think in a sense, this is, even for the other announcement, it's necessary complexity. It's not complexity for no reason. Like I said, this has been asked for. And even though it's complex in and of itself, it's replacing some other process that's offline and detached, and some coordination via email or whatever else that's happening that isn't perfect. So being something, it's complexity by itself, but it's reducing global complexity. So I don't think we have a better.
And in terms of, if you just go into the documentation part of it.
Yep.
If you go into the documentation link. So I think if you go to that C, working with change calendar, it's made pretty simple. It's not complicated at all. So I'd give this a good 4.5 for documenting exactly how to use it. It's pretty straightforward. Centralized calendar to keep everyone on the same page. And the other announcement, by the way, I would actually give that one. I would give that a 3, but more for their product management approach, where sometimes customers ask for stuff which you should be the one guiding them on what is a better way to do things. Having multiple approvers in a process just makes things slower. It makes things less agile. It makes things more bureaucratic. And I think like AWS should have had a better automated mechanism to say, one check, one control, get it out there. It's simpler, it's easier, it is more operationally efficient. And that's where the opinionated nature of things comes in. This, I feel, is one of the bad practices from the old world that's been brought into the cloud, because there are probably some very influential, very large enterprise customers who've been asking for it. But I wish it just, like, as a product manager, I cringe when it comes to features like this being added to the product.
Well, I guess you can see all the second set of requests. Could there be priority approvers, or should there be a ranking system of approvers with a point system, or a veto approver?
Exactly. Veto powers in the approval process, right?
And that's just kind of part of human nature, right? Whenever there's a complex or people who have varying amounts of power, right? They're going to want to figure out how to quantify that and structuralize it. And so maybe they should have said, here's a way to build an approval pipeline, and here's the tools to do it, but we're not going to take a stance on how to do it. I mean, that's one of humanity's big questions, is how do you distribute power among a group of people?
And particularly, I mean, in the cloud world, one of the things that you'll see being a constant, or at least has been a constant so far, is the fact that folks are very reluctant to make hard, important decisions. So now when you're federating that responsibility across 2 or 3 people, it's like saying, okay, no one really is responsible for it. It was a collective thing. And I think that's a really bad thing, because it forces, or rather, it makes people not become experts at certain things before they decide to approve something, because you rely on someone else as a crutch. It's like the collective wisdom of 2 or 3 people, you hope, will compensate for no one really knowing their stuff really well.
Oh, I think we both have some horror stories of seeing this happen before. Yeah. Okay. I can definitely picture this happening. And like you said, there's this distributed lack of responsibility. Well, I just put in my vote, but sure. I thought someone
Correct.
else was
But
looking.
it was like all 3 or 4 or 5 people decided that, this needed to be approved, and everyone agreed. And so I think it takes away from good practices in my mind. Yeah. So this one, I give it a 3. I think this is a step backwards in the overall FinOps practice and the overall process that organizations are really trying to implement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
and just to reiterate, this is not reflective of the blog post itself. This score is reflected or reflective of the product management decision.
And the fact that they decided to build this at all, rather than building some higher level abstraction and then saying, here's how you would implement it if this is how you want to do it. But there's multiple, maybe some higher order abstraction about how to build an approval pipeline, and not this is one way to do it.
Yep.
Well, let's take a 30-second break, unless you have anything else.
No. Let's go on to the next one.
Let's take a 30-second break, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about the next one. All right, here goes.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe, with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, this is EC2 Hibernate. Now supports C6i, C6ID, M6i, M6ID, and i3EN. So a big group of Intel-based instances.
Correct. So I think hibernation is generally a really good halfway step to getting efficient in terms of using all of your compute. More often than not, when you have these Windows-based instances, or sometimes even Linux-based ones, you really don't want to terminate them, because you don't know when you might need them. Just to give you an example, I have one machine which is actually running my Lotus Notes database from back from 20 years ago. That's just running over there because sometimes for legal compliance and stuff, I need to access that data. We, of course, got rid of Lotus Notes back in 2007 and moved to Gmail and things like that. But that I have one machine that's in hibernated mode, or it's just sitting over there, because whenever we need to pull out any data out of those databases, we can go in there, stand it up, pull it out. But we are not spending our money running those compute instances all the time. And the EBS volume is persisted. The state of those systems is persisted. So hibernate mode is actually really awesome. It's a halfway measure for stuff that you are not entirely sure you want to shut them or terminate them and get rid of them forever. You can hibernate them, save money on your compute, and keep your volumes persisted attached to their corresponding instances. And I think that's a great way to at least get started with cost savings.
I really like how it says hibernation is just like closing and opening your laptop lid. Your application will start. And it's funny just thinking about the evolution of Linux and remembering how much of a struggle it was to get hibernation to actually work on Linux laptops.
Correct.
I'm sure we've all had the experience of opening up your laptop bag and feeling it being hot. Oh no, my laptop didn't hibernate. And this is a solved issue now. You could do this programmatically. You can hibernate your RAM to an EBS volume. That's really neat.
Correct. Now, I think this is neat that they've extended it to a whole bunch of other instance types. It's an easy way to start saving money. I think we have a question here from Sayed.
Let's bring it up.
That we can just pull it up here. Sayed asked the question, I wonder if I could use this with EKS one day. Well, if you're using EKS, you actually shouldn't be doing this at all. EKS is meant for non-stateful workloads, right? Hibernate works very well for stateful workloads where literally you need the state to come back up as is when you shut down your machine, right? With EKS, you're going to use Kubernetes for non-stateful workloads. It doesn't make sense to use it for stateful workloads anyway. So in that particular scenario, it is more efficient to just shut down the node and then bring it back up. Now, the one thing that you can do to bring in efficiency over there is have either an EFS volume be contain all of your Docker images that need to be mounted onto a particular EKS node, or figure out a better way to bring all the storage and attach it to that particular node so that when you have to start a Docker container, the load time is minimal. You don't have to pull down everything from the repository from scratch. But there are ways to optimize it. I don't think you need to go into Hibernate mode for that. I think Hibernate mode would be a lot more expensive and may not really be the right choice over here.
So to summarize, for stateful application, or your Kubernetes application shouldn't really have state that would be dependent on it being hibernated or not. You should be able to because ideally nodes should be able to drop in and out of the cluster without affecting the overall operation. So hibernating a cluster is in effect turning off all the nodes.
Exactly. But I think the complexity is more when the nodes come back on. When they come back on, you're going to have the old states. You're going to have all the old containers running. And suddenly your Kubernetes controller is going to try to figure out how to get back to the ideal state. Because now you've got old containers that were sitting over there that just suddenly came back up. And it didn't launch it. It didn't ask for it. So once it has to first detect it. Once it detects it, it has to figure out what to kill, figure out the right node, right containers to kill so that it can come back to the ideal state. It's too complicated.
Well, Syed, I hope that answered your question. And thank you for commenting and listening to the stream. That is an interesting question. So glad you asked it.
Absolutely.
All right. So thinking about this announcement in totality, so it gives us hibernation is available for on-demand and reserved instances. It's interesting. This particular announcement was for a particular generation of Intel chips, is what it looks like.
Yes,
so
these are the latest ones in this series.
Perfect. So either something on Nitro was updated, or a Linux kernel patch was applied, or
correct,
something here was able to enable it for this generation. And now we have.
I think this has more to do with storage. So when you look at all of these I instances, they are all storage-based instances. And something in Nitro has basically enabled this for very large storage or very high IOPS instances.
Now, the data from memory is also saved to your EBS root volume. So I guess you'd have to have, if you were using a high memory instance, you'd have to have enough free space in your EBS volume to also contain a snapshot of your RAM.
Correct. I think there's a 150 gig limit on this for the instance.
Oh, yep. Hibernate.
Yeah. So they can only dump about that much. But to be able to dump that much into the disk, they probably need mechanisms to, do this effectively. So these I instances are specifically storage instances with high IO limits and high IO threshold. So there's something different in the platform.
So you're not going to be hibernating one of those SAP HANA instances with many, many terabytes of RAM.
I doubt it. I forget what the i3n instance type really is.
The i3EN.
Yeah. Were they they had what?
This is dense SSD.
Oh yeah, this is correct.
i3EN.
These are the super dense SSDs where you don't get the same throughput necessarily, but you can actually pack in the NVMe SSDs there. Yep.
Okay, but you could only use them for the smaller instances. So this can come with 768 gigabytes of memory, but you're only going to use that up for the smaller instance types.
Yep. Correct.
Let's see. So I guess up to the 3x large.
That is no. So correct. Up to the 3x large. Yep. When you go to the 6x large, it's 192 gigs of RAM. Correct.
Hey. Well, what do we think about this as a whole? I mean, it looks...
I think this definitely simplifies things. It is definitely a positive step in being more efficient. So I'll give it a simplifies and I'll give it a 4.
Perfect. And it looks like there's an accompanying news blog for it. Oh, it's
correct.
Oh, wait, interesting. So this is the original Hibernate Your EC2 post. This is by Jeff back in 2018. Okay.
Yeah.
Neat. So hibernation as a concept has been around for a while.
Correct.
I wonder if they didn't mean to link to a 5-year-old blog post.
No, I think the concept of hibernation, a lot of folks probably, I mean, especially new folks in the AWS world, probably did not even realize that there was a hibernation.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess if you're doing everything by the API, you don't
Correct.
really discover those things. But occasionally, when you use the management console, you can right click and okay, I can hibernate.
Yeah.
All right. Well, neat.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we have one more announcement.
One more announcement, and then the EFS discussion.
Great.
So let's do the next article. That is C7G metal. Okay, Amazon EC2 C7G, so that's the Graviton 3 metal instances are now available. The metal instances, that's been a trend that, for many instance types, if you want to use the entire server and everything in it, you can have what's called a bare metal size. So the advantage of bare metal is, well, I suppose there's less overhead. You're not segmenting the machine. You have access to the whole machine. See, in this case, that's 64 vCPUs, 128 gigabytes of memory. You get all of the bandwidth associated with that particular machine. When would you want to use this? And is it a good idea? Or what are your thoughts on that? I haven't used bare metal instances.
So I have a very controversial view, and I hate to bring up this analogy, but offering customers bare metal instances, I think, feels akin to gun control in the US.
Okay.
Where it's like letting everyone buy whatever guns you want. Like, hey, you have the freedom to go buy all these guns, and we're going to come up with 10 new models of this and do whatever you want to do, kind of scenario. I mean, that could be said about a lot of the other low-level services as well. But this one in particular, with so much complexity already in place, managing bare metal instances and then all the subsystems on top of it, from the operating systems to, just managing everything yourself for those instances, it just feels like an incredibly inefficient way to do things.
Yeah, it does seem like you really want to just double down on the abstraction layer and really think about why would you want this? Why wouldn't you want to just get your level of abstraction right? Why can't you choose an instance that is this size without needing the whole bare metal part?
Now, I know that there are organizations that use it. We've used it in the past as well, for a simple reason that there are certain software that will not run in a VM environment, or they've not been built to run those in VM environment.
In this part, legacy workloads not supported in virtual environments, and licensing restricted business critical applications.
Yes. And those, like bringing them into the cloud and then managing them yourselves, like don't bring those into the cloud would be my answer. Because I mean, you're just adding so much more complexity to your operations, to your management, all of that stuff. It's, in one sense, I feel like let those workloads die. Let them die their slow death. They're not meant for the future. They're not modern applications built on higher levels of abstraction. And if they force you, so you're either being held hostage with all those crazy licensing terms, get out of it. And just don't bring those workloads to the cloud, because you basically then have a very schizophrenic deployment in the cloud where you're tied to the old world, you're trying to do new stuff, and it's just all messed up in the process.
That's a really interesting perspective on that. So it's like a big what they call like a code smell. It's okay, if you need this, there's some bigger problem that needs to be addressed. Yeah. And
correct,
that's more important. I mean, and you're right, this is a lot of extra freedom. This is peeling back a pretty big layer of abstraction. So
correct,
I can definitely see the downsides to this. I mean, maybe people read this and say, okay, bare metal, that sounds like, is it faster in any way?
And here's what I predict, and I've seen this happen many times with the other bare metal instances. When someone first comes to the cloud, they're like, okay, can I just get a machine that is equivalent to the machine I have in my data center? Let me just get everything into that, right? Because that's what they're familiar with. There's just that much more inertia to learning about the cloud paradigm. There's that much more inertia about learning about the higher order services. And then when you have something like a bare metal instance that looks so similar to your existing on-prem setup, you are going to be stuck in that old world. You're going to claim that you're in the cloud, but you aren't, right? You're using nothing that is cloud.
Yeah, so you have to embrace the idioms, and this is a way of stopping you from embracing the idioms of the cloud. And it's basically saying, okay, in this case, you have almost the worst of both worlds.
Exactly.
Oh, all right, that's a neat perspective.
I will bet that you end up in a worse situation in the long run, and you'd probably be better off staying in a data center with these old workloads.
Interesting. Okay, so if you have to use bare metal, fine, but try and get off of it. And it's a indicator that either you have a licensing issue, a software issue. All right, that's a really neat perspective. Well, so given that, what do we give the announcement?
Again, I'd take this back to product management, and I'd say I would give this 3. Oh, here is one specific thing that I actually got very curious about. The C7G is a Graviton instance. Why would you offer a bare metal ARM Graviton instance? What other legacy workload is running on ARM-based servers?
That's a really good question. Right. All right.
Like I don't know, like x86 I can understand, but Graviton instances running legacy workloads?
I think my internet access had a glitch for a moment. So did we give this a number?
I'm going for a 2 now. Okay. I got less generous as soon as I realized there aren't old Graviton-based workloads.
I mean, or there might be one, and they built. All right, but I guess we're willing to be proved wrong if someone comes with a comment and says, no, this is the use case where this makes complete sense and it's actually very forward thinking. I'd love to know.
I would offer it in a private setup for that one customer who has it, not make it available to everyone. Yeah, like I said, this is like gun control in the US.
All right.
You're arming everyone to shoot themselves in the foot.
Yes. All right. Well, let's shift gears. We have a deep dive segment coming up where we want to talk about EFS intelligent tiering. Let's I've got this transition coming up. All right, let's talk about EFS intelligent tiering. First, we're going to take one more break, hear about CloudFix, and then we'll jump into EFS intelligent tiering.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your yearly savings.
Okay, you can tell the deep dive transition. My designer wasn't available to do that. So I tried my own, and what I did was I put in have a snorkeler underwater in a data center into DALL-E, and I that's a generative art. It's what GPT is for words. DALL-E 2 is for art, and so I put that into DALL-E 2 and put a few of those on screen. So that's where that came from. I thought, okay, deep dive. Let's build on this. All right, so let's get into EFS intelligent tiering. Now, we did a preview of this last week with the poem, and that actually went really well on LinkedIn. So EFS intelligent tiering, this is for optimizing your storage costs. Now, we've talked about S3 intelligent tiering. EFS intelligent tiering is a little bit different. So, and this is on the CloudFix blog. Optimize Amazon EFS storage costs with intelligent tiering.
Yeah, so you want to walk through your analysis of this, Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. So EFS is using a thing called lifecycle management. So the way, I guess the trajectory of how EFS evolved is first, and this is similar for many Amazon services, is first they'll release the standard service, and that will be extremely high performant, extremely durable. Like think about S3 standard, you could do anything with it. And then they'll say, okay, do we always need this level of service? No, let's have a reduced one. So in S3, that could be infrequent access. There's also infrequent access with EFS. Or in S3, we have several other options like Glacier. And then finally, well, I want the best of both worlds. I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want the cost savings when they apply, but I also want the performance when they apply. So I want them both, and I want a way to switch back and forth. And so that's where the intelligent tiering comes in. So what intelligent tiering is it comes in the EFS context, it is the combination of two lifecycle management policies. So with EFS, you can turn on what's called lifecycle management policy, and that allows you to have a rule that can transition a file between your standard tier and your infrequent access tier. And it can also have another rule that transfers it back from infrequent access to standard. The combination of the two rules is intelligent tiering. So that's what that's saying is if you haven't accessed your data for a while, transfer it to infrequent access. The first time you access it, transfer it back from infrequent access to standard.
Yeah, and it's a great way to do this. Typically, historically, EFS has been used as a replacement for NFS that was used on-prem, where you have one storage system and you need multiple different machines to be able to access that data out of EFS. So think of it as a cousin of NFS in a certain way. You have the same trade-offs that you have on NFS because there's one single network-assisted storage that is basically serving out all of these files as part of a regular, file system that you're familiar with. And given that, you basically tend to have a lot of objects sitting over there with the assumption that one or many of those machines that are accessing the same file system will access it. But not all of the objects or not all of the directories or folders get used quite the same way. And so this is a great way to save money by not having everything available and cached for immediate use across all the systems. If you're not going to use it very often, just put it in infrequent access and save money on that.
And EFS, it can add up quickly.
Yes.
So with S3 standard, so think about US East 1, S3 standard is just over 2 cents per gigabyte per month. EFS, it's 30 cents per gigabyte per month. So
they're 15 times the cost of S3.
Yeah. So you really want to be aware. I mean, S3, as long as you're not, you can be a little bit more careless, I suppose. With EFS, you really, that's going to add up very quickly, especially if you're having anything to do with video or media. So there's,
correct.
Now, I think this diagram that's in the article here, I think this is interesting because there's two different dimensions of savings, right? There's, with EFS, there's how redundant do you want to be across availability zones. So there's really these two parallel tracks. There's standard, which is replicated. First of all, EFS exists within a region. So US East 1's a region. EFS exists within a region, but it can span and be redundant to multiple availability zones within the region. So this is where you have standard EFS. And then you have one zone EFS, which is saying, I'm okay with it being only in one availability zone within a region. So that's this dimension, this redundancy. So that's one way of saving, is to go from standard to one zone. But then once you're in one zone, you can also save on the frequency dimension. So how often are you accessing your data?
Yeah, just for context, by the way, an availability zone is multiple data centers. So you already have a lot of built-in redundancy and disaster recovery for an availability zone. And then when you go across multiple availability zones into a region, you're already talking about many, many data centers that kind of form that kind of, that give you that cover. So for most use cases, which might be local, like, hey, I'm just going to collect logs from a bunch of different servers and then put it in one place, or, there's some temporary processing that you have to do. You probably don't need multi-AZ or multiple availability zone scenarios, because they're just going to be way more expensive. If you don't need that kind of, if you don't truly need that kind of disaster recovery, one zone will work for 95% of the people. And you can be in that, lower cost tier and save a ton of money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, the differences between 7 nines and 11 nines or something like that. 7 nines and 9 nines. It's really, one zone is already pretty good. It's not like they're losing data left and right in the one zone. It's really good. It's just that's the standard. It's so overbuilt for most of your use cases.
Yeah.
And like you said, that there's going to be redundancy in other parts of your application layer. So for example, if you're running a database, or you have regular backups, there's already going to be data durability built in other places, most likely.
Correct.
So interestingly, the trade-off, again, why wouldn't you always use infrequent access? Well, the way the pricing works with EFS is that when your data is in infrequent access and you access it, you incur an extra surcharge. So that's why you couldn't just always use the infrequent access tier, because if you were frequently accessing things in the infrequent access tier, you'd pay that extra surcharge way more than you needed to. And so that lifecycle management rule comes in, the transition out of infrequent access. That's where it moves the data back into the standard tier once it's accessed again. And so the example in this post is, say if you had a blog post and the set of media associated with that blog post was stored in EFS, it wasn't accessed for a long time, but then all of a sudden it gets reposted on Hacker News, or if this was the older days, it was reposted on Slashdot, and then it had a surge in popularity. Well, that transition out of IA rule would kick in and move the object back into the standard tier. So I guess you'd only pay the infrequent access charge once.
Correct.
Well, I guess, let's see. And then we have, in this blog post, we show how to manually enable it. So this is, you can do it with one file system. And it's funny the way you do it here. You actually give it a lifecycle rule that's empty. And I thought that was kind of a funny, there isn't a policy that there's no like delete policy or anything like that. It's just an empty policy. But then, and this is what the intelligent tiering rules look like. Now you can do this on one file system, but then if you want to have a much easier way of doing it, where it's done across all the file systems that qualify, that's where you'd want to use CloudFix. CloudFix, you can set up intelligent tiering, and we have a few criteria built into it so that you want to make sure that, for example, if there's already a lifecycle policy in place, then okay, we won't touch it, or to make sure that the throughput's set correctly. But given that it meets those criterion, we can set up EFS intelligent tiering across all your buckets now and into the future. So if someone sends up some new infrastructure and they forget to set it, it will get picked up and set.
Correct. Great. So I urge everyone to go take a look at this blog post. There's a lot of very relevant information over here. If you use EFS or intend to use EFS, please read it so that you really understand the nitty-gritty details of how this is set up. Leverage it, be efficient, and yeah, make the most of this kind of resource. We are going to be putting out a lot more of content like this that talks about how to operate some of these services in the most efficient way we know of. Again, we welcome feedback. We welcome your questions. And let us know what else you would like us to share on this particular show.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be really good. Love to know how you're reacting to this particular article. Wanted to make it as informative as possible, so you can go in there and make the best choice you can for your infrastructure that can balance the cost and the accessibility.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think there's been a really good
just about on time.
Yeah, it's been a really good show. All right. Well, we hope you have a really nice week. I think I'm going to try and tune into the Microsoft announcement starting in a few minutes and see what's happening with that. All right. Great. Well, I wish you a pleasant afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are. And thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free